Welcome to TARTLEcast with your hosts Alexander McKegg and Jason Rigby, where humanity steps into the future and source data defines the path.
Yeah, Jason,
I want to know what love is.
I want you to show me.
Speaking of love,
I don't know why that's so stuck in my. I love food,
right?
and
I love farming.
and I love farming.
It's cool. I like
Such
going to a farm.
Farming really, it's a task that really just pays back.
Yes.
You know, you don't really farm to get rich, frankly.
Right.
You just do it because you know you got to support a local community, or if you're a huge farmer, you know, you're doing it because you got to feed beef cattle because that's feeding the rest of the U.S.
Right.
You know, farming's interesting. And we think about advanced agriculture and like farming data. You go back to things like the Farmer's Almanac,
Right.
right? You walk by it in stores, you really don't think twice about it.
No, you don't.
But that thing acts as the Bible for these farmers, and it's data in print format for them to reference. You know, farmers can't, you know, like this article talks about, they don't have the extra funds to like hire a scientific team to keep up, you know, the health of the greens on a golf course. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's crazy. 2 million farmers in the United States.
Yeah, there's 2 million, of which 40% of the land mass here in the United States goes towards farming, of which 70% of that goes towards cattle grazing feed.
Right.
And, you know, that leaves us with what, you know?
Well, the 9 billion, and the article talks about this, the 9 billion is going to lead to 9 billion population is going to lead to a 70% increase in food production.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to increase it 70% from what we're at now.
Well, the only way you could sustain that, and I'm not trying to be evangelical about this, but that would be to stop any sort of cattle farming altogether. Because the majority of our resource land in the U.S. goes towards farming resources, that is, goes towards raising cattle. You can't support the world on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I think the whole industry in and of itself is going to have to take a step back and look and say, you know, how can we use this data that we're acquiring, you know, because the tractors are coming with, you know, IoT devices on them, and
your
we're
big
seeing
John Deere combine tractor.
Yeah, it's all the data is coming in.
Yeah, it's GPS tracked. It's got all that good stuff. And think about farming's it takes so much pre-planning.
Right.
I got to plan my crops. I got to plan my soil rotation. There's such a lead time before the product hits a shelf or a restaurant.
Well, even sell time. I mean, I mean, you have to anticipate how much crop you're going to yield, and then turn around and anticipate how much you're going to sell it for and what it's going for at the market.
Yeah, or on top of that, maybe you need financing. And
Right.
you go to the bank, it's like, listen, I have this much of an asset. Can you finance me against it?
Yes.
And they're like, well, do you have any data supporting that? So, you know, farmers run into an interesting predicament. And so when we look at a growing population and inefficiencies in farming in general, we have to find ways to tie in data more effectively than what the Farmer's Almanac was doing. You know, you have to look at, you know, nutrient soil content. You have to look at your crop rotations, your habits with doing so, you know, what things work the best, what type of pesticide or non-pesticide farming works, you know.
You have food safety.
Analyze it against costs, right? So you do food safety. So you're doing all those things internally for yourself as a farmer to make you more efficient, right? And drive those costs down. But then on top of that, you can pre-plan your farming, because if you're a smart farmer or a coalition of farmers, you could go then get data from individuals to know exactly what their purchasing habits are going to be. So from a sense of advanced agriculture, they can be extremely proactive in understanding what that crop life cycle is going to look like before it actually reaches that end person.
Yeah, and they said this, and I thought this was interesting. However, the global agriculture industry, you notice the word they say global, not just the United States, as a whole has a long way to travel before it reaches the kind of technology maturity needed to generate, store, analyze, and deploy data solutions.
Yeah, which is really interesting because, you know, we all get that. Well, not all of us, but I'm just saying in a generalized sense, when I go by farms, it gives me sort of like a nostalgic feel. You see the old red tractor out there, or green if it's John Deere, you know, when it's tilling the land, you know, and things are moving slow. But that's just the process that's happened for thousands of years, right? Whether you're using, you know, cattle before, you know, in a plow, or, you know, doing things by hand, not much has changed in farming. So an advancement in farming itself is going to be, really dependent on those efficiencies of the actual workflow to generate a crop and then transport that crop. So that major drastic changes, we did a show the other day that all companies are tech companies.
Right.
Farming needs to step up to the plate with that.
Yes.
And there has to be efficient ways for even, less capital intensive farming for those people who are trying to make it work in smaller communities to be able to plan their crops also. So it's not just being, having all their own IoT data, but understanding what their end consumer is.
Yeah, and I think a good thing that we're seeing is this article talks about VC investments in the ag tech space has increased 75% since 2014.
Well, it seems like an obvious investment, right? Because if you have a growing population,
right,
and that technology makes things efficient, and farming is horribly inefficient right now, and there's a huge waiting period, that's something you should put your money into because there's so much room for growth. On both sides, for the people receiving your product and for farming itself as an industry. Yeah,
and this company, this is a Forbes article, but the person that wrote the article owns a company called, I'm going to make sure I find it right here because I think it's really important. They have a hops farm in eastern Washington State, which is interesting. Yeah, we know how hops has just boomed.
Yeah,
because of all the, but what they're talking about is AgTech is becoming a bigger interest for venture capital companies like Yield Lab, iSelect Fund has also sprung up, and the global pandemic and West Coast wildfires have added urgency to answering questions about food security and safety.
Yeah, because if
security is a big word.
Yeah, food security, honestly, storage of food.
Yes.
And so if you look at advanced agriculture, great, I've picked the crop, but how do I keep it good for a long period of time before it actually needs to go into a store?
Right.
We have so much, backup stuff in storage that we end up freezing it. Just like one simple instance, I'm from Massachusetts. So Massachusetts for a long time, Ocean Spray, cranberry juice.
You guys don't need freezers in Massachusetts, right? You just set it outside.
Freaking freezing out there. But what we found is not what but the farmers found is that because they saturated the market so much with cranberries, that they're like, man, every time we farm these things, a lot of them are going to waste. So the individuals, because the price dropped on them precipitously, over in the Great Lakes region, they started doing their own mass farming of cranberries, and they freeze them all in cold storage. So it just crippled these other farmers. So, but they advanced in technology and preservation and understanding the process for that sort of farming. So it's actually preserved them in a longer life cycle, and it's actually, nixed out a lot of the smaller farmers that were doing that, I own my own cranberry bog and I clean it every year and harvest the cranberries.
Yeah, I have frozen bag of cranberries from Costco in my freezer I just bought.
Yeah, it's frozen.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a big deal. And so the farmers that we've seen that have adopted data-driven approaches and advanced technology for their farming, they're the ones that are starting to flourish.
Right.
And they're the ones that will be more well-suited and flexible to the growing population and its demands. And so if you knew ahead of time that everyone's switching over to almond milk, stop having a dairy farm. Start planting almond trees.
Right.
But they had no way to survey the market, so they feel it in such a lagging indicator. And so that's just not the most efficient way that you should be doing things.
Yeah, and I think whenever we look at tech and we look at farming, there's this idea that we've been doing this for, and you can see it in the retail space in certain industries, but we've been doing this for hundreds of years and it's been done this way and it's been just fine.
Yeah.
And not understanding, we talked about this the other day when we talked about retail, not understanding that online is here to stay, and so for us to become even more efficient, because I think on the back end side of it, once the product is sold, the food is sold, all of that is I guarantee you Walmart and Kroger's and all of them, they're extremely efficient, running with very thin profit margins.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't want to have any shelf waste.
Yes, yeah.
It's all about that inventory turnover, especially with food.
Yes.
Because it's just such a massive waste product. So if you can properly plan that across the board, across the supply chain for farming,
yes,
that's extremely beneficial. And if a farmer says that, we can predictively tell you what's going on here, and they can come back and then put that data against what Walmart is saying, you got a winning combination.
Yes.
Because I got analytics from the farm and I have analytics from inside the store. right? And they can move that back and forth. Walmart could buy it from the farmers, and the farmers can buy that information from Walmart.
Right.
And then the pair of them can buy that information from people who actually eat the stuff.
Yes. Where the people that eat the stuff can go to
TARTLE.co.
Yep. And sell.
And they can sell data packets that talk about their behaviors around food, their preferences, what they choose to shop with, anything like that. Because that information is extremely beneficial to a growing population. Because the old ways that we've seen for farmers, that worked for 550 million people on this planet.
Right.
It's not going to work for 8 billion.
Yeah, and then you also have, different areas, different climates, different soil issues, and then you have different farming techniques that may be, there's so many variables to it. The way that they farm cattle in Brazil could be totally different than the way they do it in Texas.
I know how they do it in Brazil. They lop down rainforests.
Right.
And then they put cattle grass grazing lands, and then that destroys our atmosphere because the cows are burping and farting and then releasing the methane, and then we got nothing to saturate that with the rainforest. It lacks its canopy, biodiversity drops off, and then we got a big old systemic issue. So we need to be smart.
Yes, exactly. And I think data helps us with that process.
Yeah. And again, data is agnostic. It tells you, you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. And then hopefully they'll make the lab steaks and they'll be safe for you.
Yeah.
The steak that's made
Who cares? I don't care if you print a steak out. Whatever.
3D printer.
If you need that fleshy thing in between your
3D
teeth.
steaks.
Yeah. Remember in Star Trek, they just print the food out? Mm-hmm. Like the replicator or whatever it was?
Yeah, I love that.
That's super advanced agriculture.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't even have to grow it. I just print it out.
Yeah.
You
just push the button. I like the room where they could go in and they would do training and stuff, like military training. But you could go anywhere.
It'd be like a hologram.
Yeah. It was like a holographic room, and they would be like they're in the desert or they're at some really cool, and then they would be in there with their little. Their weapons were so small.
Wwell, why do they have to be large? Large doesn't condone damage. COVID's tiny.
Yes, yeah,
it's microscopic.
Yes.
How much damage did that do?
I don't know, Alex.
Tell you what, it did a lot of damage to me.
Well, speaking of damage, we're damaging the show.
Yeah, because we're damaged goods.
Yes.
We're bad produce.
We are out.
Thank you for listening to TARTLEcast with your hosts Alexander McKegg and Jason Rigby, where humanity steps into the future and source data defines the path. What's your data worth?